Chapter 433. This group of people had destroyed all the images related to them before leaving the spaceship. It was very difficult for Sia to rely on Croydon's compass to find them. There was not a single photo. The compass was just a magic tool, it was not a search engine. Relying on the vague impression described by Fiora to search, the result could only be helplessly idling. She had no clue how to find the Kryptonians, but she could go directly to Luther. Early the next morning, Milady, wearing a navy blue dress and thin high heels, rushed to the Luther group with dozens of bodyguards and assistants in more than a dozen cars. This was her first time in the New L building. The overall layout of the building was not bad, except for the huge portrait of Luther at the entrance and Luther's quotations hanging everywhere. "All of you, wait outside." In front of Luther's office, Thea turned around and ordered. She walked over alone, and the secretary opened the door for her with a smile. "Is the missing Kryptonian with you?" Thea asked directly. Luther shook his head like a rattle drum and denied it. "It doesn't matter if you don't admit it. What I want to say is, don't try to control something you don't understand." Thea was not surprised by the appearance of Doomsday. She could not prevent it at all. The chances of the Kryptonian adjutant colluding with Luther were very high. Both sides thought the other was stupid. Norn looked down on the technological level of the people on Earth. He came to Earth with a condescending attitude. Not to mention Luther, who had solved Fermat's last theorem in kindergarten. With a little hint, it was not difficult for him to replicate Doomsday's cells with his intelligence. After all, Doomsday was the ultimate biological weapon derived from the Kryptonian cells. It was not too difficult to kill Luther now, but it was not good for Thea. The people on Earth needed real evidence to realize the danger they were in. When they were frightened to a certain extent, it would be followed by a backlash. Superheroes would erupt like a geyser, and the birth of various teams would be unstoppable. This was the only way to fight for survival in the ever-changing future. After warning Luther, Sia kept looking at him. The atmosphere between the two of them was very tense. "Don't think I don't know. You've done a lot of those experiments." Luther relied on his own conceit to resist Thea's powerful aura. The young lady didn't use her fear emotion and only used her normal aura. From this inadvertent confrontation, it could be seen that this guy's willpower was almost off the charts. Thea did not answer Luther's question. She had indeed done a lot of experiments and even tried to find Doomsday's weakness. These were things that could be done but could not be said. "So, you admit that the Kryptonians are with you?" "I admit it." Luther's pride made him too lazy to beat around the bush. He took out a few pages of documents from the drawer and said, "I helped them get a residence permit issued by your committee. They are legal residents of Earth." Thea flipped through it casually. It was indeed a formal document. The committee was responsible for the residence of more than 100,000 aliens. There were so many trivial matters that it was impossible for her, the chairman, to sign and confirm them. There were more than 10,000 employees under the committee. It was not difficult to get a few alien residence certificates. Only 3 Kryptonians? The document only mentioned 3 people. According to Fiora's memory, in addition to Norn, who was also an adjutant, there should be 6 other soldiers. However, they were not from the famous Iyer family, which was famous for having a lot of cheats. Instead, they were ordinary civilians. Their genetic limitations limited their growth. Only 3. They came to Earth after a lot of hardships, Luther said with a half-smile. Their hardships have just begun. Am I right? I hope they can still die in one piece after cooperating with you. Thea was speechless at these naive Kryptonians. Playing mind games with Luther? This mission is really difficult. I hope the Kryptonian god will bless them. Both of them got the information they wanted. Thea turned around and left. There was still some time left. Although Brainiac believed that the average intelligence of Earth was level 3, the Kryptonians were level 8, and Luther's intelligence was level 9, it would still take him a year to cross the long road of science and develop Doomsday by himself. Unlike Sia, the first Miss used all kinds of messy names and borrowed the taxpayers' money to do her own research and to build her own weapons. Although part of the results would be taken away, there was almost no loss to her own economy. She had a huge amount of cash flow every day for her to use for larger business arrangements. Her financial reach was deep into all walks of life in the country. Luther's arrogant personality made him a step behind Thea in political operations. He could only rely on his own connections and funds to force his way into the Cadmus project. There was no government to pay for it, no military support, and no consortium involvement. He was busy during the day and working underground every day. He was like an evil scientist. This was not ancient times where you could bury a few tons of gold in the cellar. In today's globalized world, it was impossible to withdraw such a large amount of money without attracting attention. Thea also had shares in the Luther Group. According to the rules, she could look at the company's financial statements. She hired more than 100 famous accountants in the industry to do nothing but keep an eye on the Luther Group's cash and his various businesses. The initial investment in the Cadmus project alone cost him at least $3 billion in cash. This was just the beginning. The subsequent daily expenses would be astronomical. Since he was willing to throw tens of billions of liquid funds into the water, Sia would not stop him. The young lady had already begun to plan how much money she would have to pay to buy the Luther Group when they failed and went to jail. The funds had been taken away, but the Luther Group had a huge foundation. The meeting between the two did not have any impact on the overall situation. Without Luther's instigation, the suicide incident was widely spread on the internet, and all kinds of questions and puzzles emerged. The best way to deal with this was to muddy the waters. The young lady ordered the company's public relations department to use money to pave the way, bribe the print media, and hire Internet Water Army to stir up trouble. In order to divert attention, she negotiated with several major agencies to make their artists break the news. Who was going to a hotel with whom today? Who was going to break up with whom tomorrow? The world's attention was involuntarily attracted. The uproar about the alien incident that had been going on for a month was gradually buried in all kinds of gossip. Although the incident had subsided, the sensitive people had noticed the existence of aliens. Several members of the committee discussed it behind closed doors and decided to maintain the status quo. Those who knew could know, but those who did not know, it was better not to know. The unlucky incident gradually subsided. The expedition team deep in Peru finally brought her good news. The temple had been found. Chapter 434. Thea excitedly rushed to the target location that night. The expedition team felt that she was a little too fast, so she used a supersonic plane as an excuse. Is this the place? Thea looked at the building that looked more like a pyramid than a temple. The expedition team was at the outermost area of the temple. The location of the temple was like a small island in the middle of a lake. The place where the lake was supposed to be was now filled with silt. The expedition team was paid to do this, so they did not continue to investigate. They could report to their superiors once they found the temple. This is the place. Look inside. I heard that this temple has a history of thousands of years. No one dares to enter it. However, according to the locals, there seems to be some traces of uncivilized aborigines on the island. The leader of the expedition team happily introduced the temple to Thea. In his mind, this task was really not difficult. He did not need to explore deeply. As long as he saw the temple, the reward would be just as generous. Such a good task could only be encountered once a year. He happily told Thea a lot of local customs. She took out her phone and asked her assistant to transfer money to the expedition team. She did not find the remaining two teams, but it was a little hard to earn money. She did not start to carefully look at the temple until the noisy crowd left. She flew into the air and looked carefully. The building was more than 300 meters long, 105 meters wide, and more than 40 meters high. Wide stone steps were laid out step by step. At the top was a pool-like altar. The four walls of the altar were carved with various scenes of primitive aborigines fighting, sacrificing, and harvesting. Indeed, as the locals said, there were signs of aborigines living outside the building, but there were not many of them, only about 30 of them. The aura here was very obscure, and there were ripples of a special frequency in the air. Every time she wanted to use the Eye of Horus to peek inside, it would be offset by the strange ripples. Even with her superb mental strength, it would be blocked by the special reliefs on the outer wall of the temple. If she closed her eyes, She would not be able to see this rather large building at all. Interesting place. Thea came in a hurry and did not bring her subordinates. She flew around the periphery and did not find anything that could pose a threat to her. Then she slowly landed in the middle of the lake. The muddy ground covered by layers of dead leaves made her a little uncomfortable in her leather boots. Who? Woo! Several natives, who only had animal skins around their waists, had different expressions when they saw her suddenly descend from the sky. Some gritted their teeth and glared angrily, while some prostrated themselves in worship. It was just that their language was really vulgar. Thea frowned and picked a cleaner-looking old man standing in the middle of the crowd. Her 5 fingers grabbed the air and pulled the old man over. Her powerful spiritual power directly entered the old man's mind, skipping the language barrier and reading his memories on the spiritual level. The result made her a little disappointed. The old man was the previous leader of this group of people, and the current leader was his son. Even so, there was no more information about the temple in the old man's memory. It was only passed down from generation to generation that they could not leave this area, nor could they enter the temple. Such a melodramatic curse. Only Merlin and Morgan had the motivation and ability to do it. It was most likely that their ancestors were sinners or something. This kind of plot could be found everywhere. It wasn't anything new. After throwing the old man back into the crowd, Thea ignored these natives and walked slowly to the entrance. There were many dried blood stains and weathered bones at the entrance. Presumably, these natives were not willing to be trapped here forever, so they kept sending people to explore the temple. Unfortunately, these brave actions were all destroyed by the curse of the bloodline. The road had been soaked in blood for a long time, and many bones had grown together with the bricks. A few skulls scattered on the ground opened their mouths slightly, as if they were still issuing a silent warning to everyone who entered the temple. Thea used 4 or 5 detection spells in a row. There were no traps at the entrance at all. Then, under the nervous gaze of the natives, she walked in. As she walked into the temple, the torches on both sides of the wall seemed to have received some kind of signal and lit up one by one. The path was not winding, and there was a crossroad inside. Thea entered from the north gate and exited from the south gate. She walked carefully and did not spend more than 10 minutes. Strange. There's nothing here. Thea turned around and walked in all directions again. Except for the sound of her footsteps that lit up all the torches in the temple, there was nothing unusual. These ancient mages all like to pretend to be masters. Milady was too lazy to search by herself. She took out the power armor and activated the artificial intelligence scanning function. The temple also hindered the scanning to a certain extent, but after all, they were different professions. Thea adjusted the scanning frequency twice, and the magic enchantment of the temple was completely deactivated. Gideon scanned the interior and exterior of the temple and began to compare the information. The gaps between the bricks, the structure of the wall, the weight of the temple, and ancient buildings were still buildings. The numbers could not be faked. After a large number of positive and negative function calculations, he found a secret door in 2 minutes. The secret door was not heavy. Thea gently pushed it, and the door opened automatically. The dark room opened to her. The dark room seemed to have absorbed all the light. The hundreds of torches in the temple were instantly extinguished. Thea seemed to be standing in the void. It was so dark that she could not even see her own fingers. She raised her hand and released a light spell. The spell that was easy to cast in the past was extremely difficult to cast now. Fortunately, Thea's magic power was considered to be one of the best in the world. Just as Etrigan said, if she was in ancient times, she would have no problem being a court mage. Thea increased the output of the light spell. Only then did she see the internal structure of the dark room clearly. The first thing that caught her eye was the dark giant coffin in the middle of the room. Thick and heavy. These words could be used to describe this giant coffin. However, it was not the coffin that attracted her attention. It was the skeleton sitting cross-legged on the giant coffin. Unlike the natives outside, whose bones were weathered beyond recognition, this skeleton was at least 9 meters tall when it was alive. From the shape of the pelvis, It was not difficult to tell that the skeleton sitting on the giant coffin was a female. Morgan Le Fay? Thea wanted to withdraw her gaze, but she found it difficult to do so. The other party's flawless white jade skeleton was constantly emitting a demonic charm. A seductive rhythm was silently knocking on her heart. The skeleton held a golden cube suspended in the air with both hands. The cube was slowly rotating. As the golden light changed, it constantly emitted knowledge about life and death, order and chaos, power, status, wealth, beauty, and knowledge that pointed to the truth of the universe. Ordinary people would definitely not be able to withstand this combination of fists. Unfortunately, Miss Thea was an exception. At first, she was really a little bewitched by the strange skeleton. However, when the skeleton came up with wealth, status, and knowledge, the corner of her mouth slightly raised, revealing a mocking smile.